Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today we're going to talk about acrylic color mixing intensity. This is the third video in my acrylic color mixing series, and it does require some prior knowledge from the first two, the color wheel video and the value video, so make sure you watch those first. Anyway, this is a great exercise for any level of painter to try to make sure you understand how to change the intensity of your colors. The colors I'm using today are red, yellow, blue, white, and black, and I'm using primary cyan, primary magenta, primary yellow, titanium white, and Mars black. You're also going to want some painter's tape to make this exercise easier on yourself. Just like my prior videos, I'm going to continue to work on these canvas boards to keep it consistent, but anything that you would regularly put acrylic paint on and that you can put painter's tape on is going to work fine. The setup for this board is very similar to the value board. I'm going to need 2 rectangles this time, and I'm going to split those 2 rectangles into 9 spaces, just like the first one and the third one here. I took the size of my board and figured out where center was, how much space I wanted around each box, and how much space I wanted to leave for the title. Now, all I did is I made those marks on the edges of the board all the way around. So it's like 1 3/8 inches here, and it's 1 3/8 inches here, so there's little marks on the bottom of the board. There's also little marks on the top of the board. And instead of drawing my pencil line all the way across the board, I just used tape and lined it up with each of those lines and then put that down. And that'll just function as my line. And then the tip I have for using this painter's tape is to use your fingernail and kind of scratch it along the edges. That way none of the paint will bleed underneath and kind of seep outside of the space you want it to go. So this is going to be a box and this is going to be a box. So I'm just going to do that all the way around the edges. My boxes are 11 1/4 across, and I need 9 spaces inside, which is 1 1/4 inches per box. So I've done the same thing with my marks across the bottom and the top, but for this one I do have to use my pencil. So I'm just going to line up both lines and then draw here and here inside of these boxes. Intensity is the saturation of a color. The more intense a color is, the more saturated it is. So when something is fully intense, fully saturated, it's called a hue, like this cyan here. This is a hue for blue. Now we know from the value video we can add white and black to our hues to make them lighter or darker. But what if you need it to be less bright, less intense? Well, there's a couple ways we can do that. The first way we can reduce intensity in hues is to add a complement. So for my hue, I'm using this primary cyan, and I'm going to put it in this box here on the left. Next, we need to find out what blue's complement is. And complementary colors are colors that are directly across from each other on the color wheel. So if we refer back to our color wheel, we can find primary blue and figure out what color is directly across. And we come up with secondary orange. So I'm going to mix up some secondary orange and put it here on this right box. Similar to how we made our colors for the value video, I want to start with the middlemost box and make a perfect mix of blue and orange. Just like how we did here, where I made the 50% gray first, and then made these 3 left ones, and then made the 3 right ones. So I'm going to make that perfect mix of blue and orange first, and paint it in the middle box. The way you check if you have a perfect color mixed here is you look at it and you ask yourself, what color is it? This one is a little bit of a blue-black color, and it's too blue, which means I need to add just a little bit more of my orange. But if I look at it and I'm saying, oh, it's green. Why is it green? Because blue and yellow make green. That's probably because there's too much yellow in your orange and you need to add more red. If it's too violet, you have the opposite problem where you need to add more yellow into your orange because red and blue make violet, so it would look kind of violet. In fact, this is the way I was taught to make black paint in college. We weren't allowed to buy Mars Black or Bone Black or anything like that. We had to mix secondaries until we had something that was so neutral it would pass as black. And this is very, very close. I just think it's a little too blue, so I add just a hint of orange to it just to make it a little bit more where I want it to be. Something that's too neutral. It doesn't look like any other color on the color wheel at all. It doesn't even have a hint of that. So this here is my true neutral color, and I'm going to paint that right here in my middle box. Similar to the value video, I'm going to mix up these three first and then these three. So I'm taking my neutral and my blue and I'm going to make 3 different puddles of different ratios of the paint. One that has a lot of blue with a little bit of neutral, one that's half and half, and one that has mostly neutral with a little bit of blue. I want them to look very different from each other and very different from their 2 parent colors. Just like the blue side, I've mixed up my 3 oranges for the orange side, and I'm just going to fill them in order, with the oranges closest to orange and the most neutral closest to neutral. With the intensity scale done, you can see we have some navies on the left and some rusty orange browns on the right. Incidentally, this is how you make brown if you don't have any. You just take a lot of orange and add a little bit of blue to it. Now, this does work with every color on the color wheel. You could do yellow and purple or red and green, and if your purple is too royal purple, you can add a little bit of yellow so it's not such a loud purple. And the same goes with red and green. If your green is too bright and you want it to be more muted, you could add some red into it. You can cheat a little bit sometimes bringing the intensity down by adding some of the browns to your colors if you have brown paints. It doesn't always look good, especially with like yellow, I found. So try using the complement. That's the way you should be doing it instead of cheating a little bit with the brown. The next way to lower intensity is to use tones. So if you remember from the value video, we talked about how white in a color is a tint and a color in black is a shade. If you take gray in a color, you end up with a tone. So I'm going to do the same blue here just so you can kind of see a comparison to when you use a complement. So I'm going to put that same cyan here, and then I'm going to mix up a neutral gray and put it on the right. I based my gray off the 50% gray from my value board. Now, any of these grays in this value scale would work. You would just have lighter tones of blue or darker tones of blue based on which one you picked. This intensity scale is a little bit harder than something like this because my mid color isn't as definite as something like a true neutral. So I'm going to just mix up 7 different ratios between blue and gray on my palette until I have 7 that are very different from each other. One isn't too blue, one isn't too gray, and then I'm just going to put them here in order in this scale. the blue gets washed out by the gray very quickly. And like I said, you can do this with any gray, a light gray, a dark gray. I just picked one in the middle so you could kind of see a middle of the road one. And now that both intensity scales are done, I can take off all the tape. Learning to mix intensity is important because if you're using only hues all the time, your painting is going to look a little cartoonish instead of natural. And the hardest thing for me is deciding between these two what to use. And the way I do that is I look at a painting or my plan and I decide, if it's a sunshine painting, there's lots of warm colors like orange and red and yellow, I tend to go the complement route. But if the painting is a nighttime painting or there's lots of blues and purple, I tend to go the gray route. So you kind of have to look at your piece and decide which one would be better. And that's sometimes something you have to learn over time with experience. And I have some examples of some of my past work that I can show you which one of these I used for that. So the first example is a painting called Beyond the Sea, and you can see there's lots of blues and purples in this. And so to tone down the intensity of this, I would be using gray. In fact, you can see the lighthouse itself is kind of a blue-gray, a desaturated blue color. This next one is called Grapefruit Falls, and you can see that it's daytime, there's sun, all of the greens and the yellows are very bright. But to desaturate some of those darker greens and some of the more muted yellows, I was using the complements, just to kind of tone those colors down and make some of those shadow colors a bit deeper and less intense. This last painting is called Cabin by the Lake, and I actually use both in this painting. The faraway mountains, I wanted them to look further away. And when things are far away, they look desaturated. There's a lot of gray in them. That's a trick called atmospheric perspective, and I use that here. So the furthest back mountain has a lot of gray in it, and the next one that's closer has less gray, and then the very close one has the least amount of gray. So all of that was done with tones, but all of the foreground stuff, you can see it's sunny, it's bright, there's lots of bright colors. To tone down the intensity of those, I was using the complements. Because I didn't want them to have the same trick as the mountains in the background, I needed them to be different, and I didn't want to tone down the intensity too much, so the complements kind of still gave it that nice daytime glow. So I hope this helped you understand how to lower the intensity of your colors, and next time we're going to do an exercise that's all about how we can change one hue. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another MalMakes video.